A couple of months ago, I got a call from Pete Newsham. As I alluded to with Dave Grants, he asked me to induct Dave. The next day, the phone rang, and it was John. And he said, "Pete call you?" "Yeah, he called me about Dave Grants." And, No. I'm calling you. I'm going in. I want you to introduce me. So for the next 2 months, I've been trying to think of everything I know about John, which, as it turns out, is not much, because I didn't know he used to hang over the fence at Dave Grants' place when he was a kid. But then I looked at John's career, not only what I know of it as a fellow radio guy and fellow racetrack guy, but what's elucidated in his introduction, and it occurred to me that John and I are, in fact, twins from different mother. I'm older. John is the young, good-looking one, as the younger twin always is. Back in the mid-'70s, John was working in radio on the east side of New England at WOTW and the Rock Garden, which was one of my favorite stations back in the day. I was working on the east side of New Hampshire, west side rather, on the west coast at WKNE, doing the same thing, announcing on the radio. We both had radio race results programs. John's Speed Line was one that I found out about from somebody, God knows who now, but I needed results from mine because I'm stuck in Keene and there's nobody around me that's involved in racing outside of Monadnock. So I said, "Call John." So I called John. "Oh yeah, I'd be glad to give you some results." So John would tell me about all the tracks that were in operation on the east side of New Hampshire and give me a voicer, which is always good for sound, and I do the same thing with Monadnock and Claremont. This went on for a number of years. As time goes on, other things change in our lives. At one point, John moved on, as you may have seen, to Nesson to do TV show. Great thing to do. Our paths changed, but our lives didn't change any. Oddly enough, John and I were both married at the time. Later on, we were both divorced. We are now both married to really incredible women who have made a very important part of our life. And then kind of went blank. As brothers do, you drift apart, you don't see each other. Along comes the Modified Racing Series. They started at Monadnock. They'd gone through a couple of announcers, and all of a sudden this tall guy walks into the booth, and it's John. "Well, hi. Well, how you doing?" It's like we just left dinner the night before, and we carried on a great conversation. After that, it became Tri-Track. "Oh, here's John." And then the Super Modified Series came to Monadnock, and there's John. So, and then John said, "Well, I can't make the show, will you do it?" So it turns out, I guess, that over the years, the one thing I've enjoyed about John is A, he's super smooth, B, there is no ego involved in his show at all. And I think he and Pete and I and Dave probably all share the same philosophy, which is we ain't the show, but without us there is no show. And when John's there, you know he's there, and you know what's going on the racetrack is important. So it just makes me really excited to induct into the 2021 Hall of Fame class my brother from another mother, the young, good-looking one, John Spence.
Boy, David, you did a real intense study on me. Me and microphones don't get along good. First of all, thank you, Dave. I was very grateful when you accepted my request for you to come up here and take care of my end of the deal, all for the reasons that you have given, that he's played a major part in my racing career, as well as several others who I am going to recognize here, but we'll get through this as quick as we possibly can. Can anybody adjust this? There. If I'm going to yak, I want to be. There's no cars running. That's quiet right now, David. I'd like to welcome, I guess, most of you to this facility and welcome you to the Whitcomb country. And you're saying, what's the Whitcomb country? Well, if you knew any of the local racers around here, Seems like they all live in Westford, Mass. And I just wanted to throw that in there. I'd like to welcome my family, my wife Terry. We all hear the saying about my rock, my superstar. Terry is my rock and has been for 27 years. As Dave noted, we both rebounded well. And she's always there when I need her. Strongly has encouraged me to be involved in racing to the degree that I am. Different series, Friday night home track at Lee, et cetera, et cetera. So, honey, thank you for the support. I'd also like to recognize I'll tell you a story about Herb Simpson and microphones in a little bit. I'd also like to recognize my children that are here today. My daughter Jennifer, Shannon, Bobby, and I've had several people ask me, is Junior here? No, he's not. He couldn't be here. He resides in South Carolina. He's working this weekend. He works for Boeing. And as you know, with Boeing, they've had a lot of things go on, and so therefore he's got a lot of work, lots and lots of overtime. Yes, he is involved in racing. He's working for Florence Motor Speedway, and he just completed his second season there. I won't get into the details of the story because that's not what this is about, but he's very, very happy. He's working for a NASCAR-sanctioned track down there. Some of you may recall the Zacharias family from upstate New York. Well, Steve Zacharias is John's boss. They bought the track when they sold Myrtle Beach, moved on down to Timmonsville, South Carolina, in Cale Yarborough country, and that's where John is today. Thank you for asking. My granddaughters, Allie, Maddie, my grandson Ryan, his girlfriend, she's also a Maddie. I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to come visit. I know Madison is up in Vermont now with her boyfriend, so they made the trek down. So I'm grateful for that. I really greatly appreciate that, guys. Dave, that was good. I liked what you said. That's good memory about our days down at the bottom of Manchester Street in Lowell and Quebec Street. I learned of racing away from the racetrack because, as Dave noted, there was this ungodly rumbling sound that came from the backyard of his home on Quebec Street quite often. And that, of course, was firing up the race car or the jalopy, whatever it was, and doing the necessary work they would need to do to get ready for a weekend at Pines and Hudson. And he's the one that told me you used to see fingers going through the chain link fence. And yeah, that was me, Dave. And good memories, buddy. You could get a little bit more involved if you went over two streets. Dave was on Quebec, I was on Manchester. There was a street called Blossom Street. And then the next street over, the legendary Choppy Baldwin lived there. And I'll tell you, he could make some noise. Some of you may remember him, Choppy Baldwin. I got involved in racing back in 1960. My family, we went to Hudson. We went to the last race of the year, and that was that. And we had to look forward to the following season, and we did, 1961. And we became constant race fans at Pines and Hudson Speedway. So we were a traveling family. Wherever Ollie raced, we went. And it kind of stayed that way for quite a while. And then when I got my driver's license and I was able to go out on the road and do my thing, I was out on the road doing my thing. And that included an opportunity to get involved from a media standpoint to work in conjunction with the radio show that I was going to travel around to different speedways and form up write-ups and send Dave some information from my show. And it just got off the ground in 1973. 1975, I got a call at the radio station, and it was the track's operator and manager, a great lady by the name of Flo Hudson. Flo ran the racetrack at Hudson and at Pines right up until its demise in 73. But she ran the thing all the years after Oscar Ridland had passed away. Terry Ridland was part of the operation there, but he pretty much just paid attention to what the money was looking like coming in and out. And Flo was the one that really got things going there for a lot of the competitors, and everybody loved working for Flo. When I went to work for Flo, she's the only promoter that offered me to come downstairs at intermission, and she had a couple of ice-cold bottled beers waiting for me. Yeah, she was pretty special. But I joined forces with them in 1975, but it was really a tough decision for me to make because, as he was recognized earlier today, my good friend, a dear friend, loved him like he was my father, and that was Jack Ratta. Jack Ratta called me and said, listen, I need you to do me a favor. And now, I had learned a lot from Jack the 2 previous years, and also Pete Zanardi as well, about how to handle the media and what needed to be done and so on and so forth, so that they would use the stuff. So anyway, I get the call from Jack, and he says, I need you to help me out. I said, what's that? I need you to help me at Hudson and Lee this weekend. I said, what? Why? He said, I'm not going to be here. I'm going out to Indianapolis to cover the 500 for the Union Leader, because Jack was employed at the Union Leader. And I said, okay. I said, I've never done it before. And he said, you'll be all right. I'll leave you my information. He says, you can have it. He says, it's full of rosters and all the information you'll ever need. I said, okay. So I gave it a shot. Started up at Lee on Saturday night and came down to Hudson on Sunday. Got through it okay. I wasn't overly pleased with my effort, but the track seemed to be pleased, and that was that. During the course of the next week, I get a phone call, and it's Jack. And I thought he was just checking in. And, of course, keep in mind, this was regular telephones. We didn't have cell phones. We couldn't get into a long conversation. So anyway, he says, the typical, hey, buddy, I need a favor. I said, what now? He said, I'm still in Indianapolis. Jack forgot to come home. You can, if you knew Jack, you can figure that out. But anyway, I ended up there the following week, and that was A-okay. And then I got a phone call from Flo Hudson that week, and she says to me, John. I said, yes. She said, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. What about Flo? I want you to come to work for me. And I said, oh, boy. Not the way I wanted it to go. And I'll be honest with you, I never, ever, ever intended to be a track announcer. I just wanted to travel around, like Sean Corshane said earlier, do write-ups, do whatever you needed to do to put together some information, for the media. And that's all I wanted to do. So I ended up going to Hudson because she was literally begging me to go there. And a lot of you may not know, but the legendary Steve Bird, good old Birdie, he was the announcer at Hudson the year prior to Jack taking it. But he didn't want to do it anymore. He had had enough of doing it, and that was that. So I ended up filling in for Jack a third time. He calls me up, and I said, oh, boy, where are we now? He says, I want you to take it. And I said, Jack, I don't know if I want to do that. Well, I'll cut to the chase real quick. We had a fast phone conversation. He called Florence Hudson. He called Bob Bonzer up at Lee, and I agreed to give it a shot. I wasn't sure that I was going to stick with it, stay with it. I did not know if it was going to be for me, but I decided to do it. I hadn't done anything other than high school football games on radio, but we stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck. I just completed my 46th year announcing stock car races. And it's been a hell of a run. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a hell of a run. Had a lot of fun. Some of the stuff I'd like to recognize. I'm not going to take up too much time. I can't even read my own typing. Here we go. When you've been around as long as I have, you come in contact with many, many people. And I have, and I'm sure Dave has. I'm sure that Pete Falcone has. Anybody in our position comes in contact with drivers, car owners, racetrack operators, et cetera, et cetera. So over the years, yes, I've met a lot of great people up and down the East Coast and even into Canada. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Florence Hudson, the previously mentioned. She, as I indicated, was a very hard worker, and she was always made sure that she called me at the radio station by Wednesday so I knew what she wanted to do for her commercial copy for the upcoming week at Hudson Speedway. What did she want to run in her ad? She says, I don't care what you run. Just do this. Make sure you mention Mo Tweedy. And I says, I will. Now, again, this is the first time I've experienced this with her. And I said, why is that? Because there's 50 that hate him and there's 50 that love him, and we want them all there. True story. I could tell you some Mo Tweedy stories, too, but, you know, it's a family operation here. So we ended up doing that with Bob Bonzer. Bob Bonzer was an interesting character. For those of you that don't know, Bob Bonzer was the builder and the operator, the promoter, if you will, of the Tri-Oval in Lee, New Hampshire, Lee Raceway. That was an interesting gig. The first time Bob said he needed to give me a chat, he needed to have a little talk with me, he asked me to come over to his house. Now, if you're familiar with Bob Bonzer, you know who he is and what he does for a living, or did do for a living. The family still has the operation. But he wanted me to come over and have a chat over at his nudist colony. What's wrong with that? If you have ever been in there, you know the lay of the land. If you don't, the camp portion is way, way, way back. But anyway, he was an interesting character. He'd leave Lee on Friday nights, and if you can believe this, we were running opposite Star Speedway. We had to be out of our minds, because if you think that Lee is having low car counts right now, they were pretty low back then, because Nesmer was king up in that area. They had the supers, they had an outstanding car counts, and more importantly, they had a huge fan base. We had nothing much going in Lee, with the exception every once in a while we'd get a decent crowd, but it wasn't anything to write home to your grandmother about. So anyway, Bob would make this trip down to Epping religiously every Saturday night just to get a glimpse at the parking lot. He'd take a trip through there and then he'd come back up, and I don't know if he would be embellishing or what he'd be doing, but he's going on and on and on. You know what? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. That was his favorite line. You could never tell if he was telling you the truth or not, but he needed to go down and check on what Charlie Elliott was getting for fans down there at Star Speedway. No lie. Bob Weber. I had a great run with Bob at Star. He came to me shortly after buying the track, and I jumped at the opportunity. It was a difficult decision to leave Bonzer and go down the street, as they referred to it as, at Star Speedway, but I made that choice, and it worked out for the good. And I was there for several years, and I really enjoyed working for the big guy. Here today, and I was really glad to see them here, Red and Judy McDonald. what a time I had at Lee. Back in the day when they were the pro stock racetrack of the East and they were really, really packing it in up there, they made a lot of noise. That was our racing term for really a good turnout of cars, a lot of this and a lot of that, all positive stuff. Red and Judy did a great job up there. And, of course, Pete Falcone was an announcer up there. I think I followed in his steps, or maybe Kevin Boucher's, to take over the Friday night announcing job. I think Pete had moved on from there. But it was really good to see fellow Hall of Famer Red McDonald and his bride Judy here today. Nice to see you folks. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting those that have gone into the Hall of Fame ahead of you. Also, Norman Wren, who currently owns Lee USA Speedway, Monadnock Speedway. David works for him over on that side of the state. And also Herb Simpson. Now, you're probably saying, where does Herb Simpson fit in here? Well, he fits in during an integral part, a real important part of Hudson Speedway history because Ridland wanted to get out of Hudson. And they wanted to put it up for sale, and they did. Then came Dick Tate Brothers Paving up there in Hudson. He came to my house one night and said, I want you to come to work for me. And I'm going, I'm a radio guy. I'm not pounding asphalt. And he says, no. He says, I'm going to put an offer in for Hudson. I said, okay, what are you looking for from me? He says, maybe if you can just do the PR and do some announcing and stuff. I said, okay, all right, we'll look at it, see if we can come together on it. And he said, good deal. So he did, eventually. But he and his brother Billy decided to hold off on running the racetrack themselves because at that time, this was back in 1977, they were wicked busy in the asphalt paving business. And they decided to seek someone that could run the show. And he chose, Cousin Herb Simpson. He came in for the 77 season, and that was quite an experience. Had a lot of fun. But the one thing that jumped out to me, and I was thinking about it driving here today, Herbie was Herbie. But the thing that he did to me the day before we were opening up at Hudson, he was down cleaning up down in front of the tower, cutting grass or whatever he was doing. And I said, hey, Herb, this microphone's not working. Now, I said it to him 3 or 4 times, but he never acknowledged me. So about the 5th time, I said, Herb, this thing is not working, and we're opening tomorrow. He says, John, if you don't get off my back about that microphone, I'm going to come up there and show you what you can do with your microphone. So the following year, another different operator comes into Hudson, and he asks both Bob Watson and myself to come on board in 1978. And a gentleman by the name of Ken Howard, who owned a business over in Plastow, New Hampshire, he leased it for a year. Basically, they were all keeping the thing open, and because of all the pressure from the townsfolk in Hudson. Then the Nesmer Group came in and took over. But that was quite an interesting experience, working for so many different promoters in a very short run. Okay, Jack Bateman, MRS, going on 18 years with that series. I've been with him since he started. And they're right now putting a schedule together for the upcoming year. These are people that I feel are very, very important to my career. They've done a lot for me to help me be a part of their gig, and I've enjoyed every one of the events that, or sanctions, I should say, that we've raced at. And that was been a hell of a run for Bateman. ISMA Super Modifieds. The day that I walked in down at Waterford Speed Bowl, they had contacted me and asked me if I'd come on board. They wanted an announcer, and they asked me if I would consider it. And I said, I looked at my schedule, and I said, yeah, I can do it. When I walked in there that day, it was like going home, the Super Modifieds. Because I had done so many Super Modified races in the early years in the early 80s was Star Speedway, and a lot of those guys had advanced on to ISMA. It was like going home. And I'm still there for the New England shows. Also, tri-track open wheel. My good friend Dick Williams, Jimmy Schaefer, the racing guys, they got that thing off the ground. And boy, what a job they did. In time, the decision was made to go in a different direction. They sold. And today, it is run by Wayne Darling and Ed Bennett, but continues to grow. Proud to be a part of it. And I'm also working for SMAC. Some of you probably don't know what that is. It stands for Supermodifieds Allegiance. And I'm helping them out when I have the opportunity or I'm available, let's put it that way. But these following friends have been a big, big part of my life in all that I've done over the last 48 years. So I'd like to recognize them, and I'm going to wrap it up here. Very special people that had a big impact on what I was doing. As I mentioned, Bob Watson. Boy, oh boy, did we make a lot of noise. And that was at Lee. Developed that Yankee Modified division, did a whole lot of different promotions. And quite frankly, we drove Russ and Kenny crazy. Jerry Herview, who was a big part of our Speedline show when we launched it on WOTW. One guy here that is, I can tell you that he is very near and dear to my heart, and I miss him. Bob Devaney, the Barn Rat. Chris Romano, Bruce Cohen, Bruce Arnold, Kurt Gowdy Broadcasting. You're probably saying, Kurt Gowdy? Yeah, that Kurt Gowdy. Kurt was funny. I worked for him for 13 years. He was funny because he was a typical owner. He wanted to look over the books and see where we were strong in terms of money coming in and so on and so forth. And so therefore, he said, he was in his office one day. John Bassett was the general manager, and Kurt called everybody by the last name. Hey, Bassett, where's all this money coming from on Saturdays? Oh, that's Spence's talk show. Talk show? Yeah. What kind of talk show? Motorsports. Yeah, we're on every Saturday. We were sold out. And we even had banks, 2 banks. And the first hour was one bank, second hour was another bank that wanted on that show because of the popularity and the reaction they were getting on the phones and some of the media that was picking up on it. Yeah, Gowdy liked that. New England Sports Channel, 1987. I had done some local access television, but I never did anything around the world at the time because they had them big, big dishes in the backyard, and we were doing pretty much the same concept as the Speedline radio show, taking telephone calls that turned out to be from everywhere. Heavy, heavy amount of calls from down Florida, and we were getting calls from guys that I had not heard from in years that were calling the show. And we had an outstanding lineup of people. And whenever I needed something to be good and to get things started in the proper way, I always, always reached out to Ronnie Bouchard. Ronnie, I called him up at the dealership and I said, listen, he says, what do you got going? I said, we're going to debut a television show that's going to be on by the satellite all over the country, but it's geared toward New England auto racing. When do you need me or what time? That was always Ronnie's answer. I remember when we were doing a race car show up at the Armory in Manchester, who do you think I reached out to? And we got the 47 up there, and we actually had tires competition. Ronnie was there, overseeing the whole thing. I did movie parties, pretty much like Dan Pardee did. up in the Merrimack Valley, southern New Hampshire, northeastern Massachusetts. And Ronnie was always my special guest. One year he couldn't make it, and the guy took the time to call. And he had a hard time. Excuse me. He had a hard time getting a call through because it was in a Catholic church hall. So they ended up calling a rectory. And they were able to get me to come to the phone that way. But it was Ronnie, and he couldn't get out of his driveway because of an ice storm. But the guy was all apologies. I said, Ronnie, don't let it bother you, man. I'd rather have you do that than have an accident on the way here. That's the kind of guy he was. So, also, Kenny Smith, Russ Conway. Can't say enough about the both of them. They played a major, major part in my career in this racing business. Russ was like having a bitchy brother. I say that tongue in cheek, because boy, oh boy, he'd get on me sometimes. But anyway, we had some great years working in conjunction with NESMRA. NESMRA, to me, was probably one of the best sanctions that ever happened in the New England region. And I'll wrap it up this way. Before I do, I want to say a very special hello to some people I recognized in the audience today. Eric Hudson and Jill. Nice to have you with us here. Dave Dion's up from Florida. He told me he would be here this past summer. He's here. Also, my buddy Dickie Spofford, Bobby Whitcomb. Good to see you guys out there. Annette, Joyce, and David, Steve Lochner, and Lori. Good friends of me and Terry. And Steve was the tech man when I went to work in 1975 at Lee. I will close it up with this, folks. Ordinary people with extraordinary careers. Ollie Silva, Eddie West, Charlie Elliott, Don McLaren, Smokey Boutwell, Russ Conway, Ken Smith, Bentley Warren, Dick Batchelder, Dick Berggren, Howard Brown, Paul Richardson, Peter Fiandaca, Mike Murphy, Vic Miller, Skip Matzak, Jerry Dolliver, Russ Nutting, Jim Martell, Lou Boyd, Red McDonald, Paul Dunnigan, Russ Wood, Bobby Gahan, Bob Weber Sr. And now you have Dave Grants from Lowell and John Spence from Lowell. Thank you to the committees. Thank you to NEAR. Much appreciated, and I am definitely humbled. God bless.